This weekend, Donald Trump put out a list of 28 things that he promises to do in his first 100 days. It's kind of like the contract with America that Newt Gingrich did. Newt Gingrich put out 10 specific items that he pledged to do if the Republicans got a majority in the House, and I pretty much made good on that. Now, of course, he's already disclosed what his Supreme Court picks would be, and what this shows is a kind of openness and transparency that we have not seen from the Obama administration and certainly not from Hillary Clinton. Let's take a look at some of these requirements. The first three or so I would call a calcified government reform. He's going to propose a constitutional amendment to push for term limits on members of Congress, also a hiring freeze on all federal employees, and a requirement to reduce the growth of regulations to say that for every new one, we've got to get rid of 2 old ones. But then let's take a look at the corrupt government. I think this is very important. He's got a 5-year ban on White House and congressional officials becoming lobbyists after they leave government service, but a lifetime ban on White House officials lobbying on behalf of a foreign government. Ooh, that's pretty amazing. That would be something that would be very difficult for Hillary Clinton and the White House to do, since there's been a revolving door between the Clinton Foundation and these foreign governments making contributions and a pay-for-play institution. So he understands the corruption. The next section, he addresses trade inequities, the things that are destroying the American economy. He's going to renegotiate NAFTA under Article 2205, withdraw from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, direct the Secretary of Treasury to label China a currency manipulator, direct the Secretary of Commerce, U.S. Trade Representative, to identify foreign trading abuses and use every tool to stop those. So that's the trade block. The next thing he looks at is energy. Folks, you need to understand that energy is a very important part of the globalist strategy. When Hillary Clinton said she wanted a hemispheric common market that had open borders and open trade, she really focused on sustainable energy. In other words, shutting down our energy production here in America. That's what that's code word for. Now, he talks about lifting restrictions that are put on developing our internal sources of energy, $50 trillion worth of job-producing American energy reserves like shale oil, natural gas, and clean coal. Also lift Clinton roadblocks on other energy projects. And then he talks about the Constitution, canceling unconstitutional executive actions, and then talks about his replacement for Justice Scalia. And we've already seen the list of 20 judges that he has. The next thing, open borders, cancel all federal funding to sanctuary cities. If you're going to be a city that is going to thumb its nose at the federal law about our borders, then you shouldn't be getting any federal funding. And that's precisely what he's doing. Removing more than 2 million criminal illegal immigrants from the country, canceling visas to foreign countries that won't take them back. In other words, if you won't take back a criminal who is here illegally, then we're not going to let anyone from your country come in with a visa. Also, suspending immigration from terror-prone regions where vetting cannot safely occur. Remember, Hillary Clinton said that when she was talking 3 years ago to Israel, she said, an Israeli group, she said, we have a problem in Jordan. We have the Syrian refugees that are coming into Jordan, but we can't vet who are real refugees and who are jihadists. They have absolutely no way of doing that for the people going from Syria into Jordan. Well, guess what? 3 years later, we still don't have a way to distinguish the jihadis from those who are refugees. And so he would suspend that until we have the capability of vetting it. And then your take-home pay. He talks about how he would give the middle class a 35% tax cut. Okay, that 35% cut that he's talking about for the middle class, that's really understated, because what Trump is talking about doing is giving you tax deductions for your medical expenses. That's a huge savings. It would actually make your health care affordable, unlike Obamacare. So what Donald Trump offers us is incentives and ways to pay for it with tax deductions rather than unfunded mandates. It used to be that unfunded mandates were something that the federal government imposed on local governments, on state governments. Now they're imposing unfunded mandates through things like Obamacare on individuals, on businesses, because that's the way government grows. Now, one of the other things that Donald Trump came out this weekend speaking about is the consolidation of media, opposing the AT&T Time Warner deal. It says, according to CNN, and of course they have an interest in this, they say Donald Trump is trying to turn media consolidation into a campaign issue. It should be an issue. We should understand what is happening. We're already down to about 5 mega corporations, media conglomerates, that are controlling all of our information. That control is going to get much tighter, because what they're doing is talking about controlling the content delivery as well as content creation. And if you understand what's in the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the TTIP, the Transatlantic Partnership Agreements, those are going to exert control through copyright over all intellectual property. So as we see this media consolidation, you have to understand that they're going to strangle anyone who is outside of their system. They're going to control the content. And that's precisely what Donald Trump is talking about here. He says, this is an example of the power structure that I'm fighting. AT&T is buying Time Warner, thus CNN. It's a deal that we will not approve in my administration because it's too much concentration of power into the hands of too few. Any merger would have to be reviewed and approved by federal antitrust regulators, reports CNN. Trump also said if elected, his administration would look at breaking up the 2011 merger of Comcast and NBC Universal. Now, let me explain this, because we've got another article here that says that Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are both skeptical of the AT&T-Time Warner merger. They say both major party presidential campaigns expressed concerns just hours after this was announced. Well, that's not true. Tim Kaine came out 24 hours after this was announced and said, well, we would have to take a look at that. But let me tell you, this is not something they're going to oppose. Remember that it was Bill Clinton who got behind the mergers that gave us a handful of banks that were too big to fail. Now, that was done before Glass-Steagall. Many people understand that Glass-Steagall allowed them to assume and to take part in risky business ventures that they had not been allowed to participate in before. But the real key issue was the consolidation. And that was driven from Bill Clinton, just as we see Hillary Clinton prostituting herself to Wall Street, to Goldman Sachs. The chief of staff of the White House for Bill Clinton was Erskine Bowles from North Carolina. And it was in Charlotte where the biggest merger approval began. And that was Nations Bank and Bank of America. When that was proposed, everybody said that's such a large merger, it will never be approved by the federal government. Yet Erskine Bowles from North Carolina made sure that that happened for his home state. Bill Clinton made sure that that happened. And they predicted at the time that was going to set off a wave of defensive mergers, that we would wind up with just a handful of big banks, which we did. Then those big banks, through regulatory capture, pushed through the repeal of Glass-Steagall. Then after everything blew up in 2008, we had another couple of Democrats, Dodd and Frank, gave us a Dodd-Frank bill. And what that did was put the final nail in the coffin for all small and medium-sized banks. You understand how this works. The same exact thing is going to be happening to communication, to information, to news if we allow this to happen. That happened to the big banks. That is precisely the problem with it. Now, in other news, we saw on Friday that Oprah Winfrey went on the T.D. Jakes show and told her audience, she's not coming over to your house. You don't have to like Hillary Clinton. Is that true? Is Hillary not going to come over to your house? Is the government going to leave you alone? No, the NSA has embedded itself in everything that you do in your house. They're going to be coming into your house in a much bigger way as the Internet of Things rolls out. They're going to be monitoring everything that everybody does in their house. And of course, the IRS comes to your house as well. The IRS is taking a look at your budget. They're making your family budget their budget. And as we pointed out, Hillary Clinton has token cuts on everybody. She says she's not raising taxes for those who are making less than $250,000, but she's not really giving anybody tax cuts. Donald Trump is giving huge tax cuts to people who are the working class, the working poor, and the middle class. But when she says they're not going to come over to your house, are you going to have a house? Are you going to be able to afford a house with Hillary Clinton's open borders? This report from the LA Times says that nearly 1 in 4 students at an LA high school have immigrated from Central and South America. Now, of course, the schools are paid for by your property taxes. And are you going to be able to afford to keep your house if you have to raise the property taxes to build new schools for the people who are immigrating uncontrollably at levels that we have absolutely no control over? If we're going to have open borders, it's not going to stop with Central and South America. It's also going to include Asia. It's going to include the Middle East. We're going to have to educate everyone, and in the language that they choose. How are you going to be able to afford that? Hillary Clinton's not going to come to your house. You may not even have a house that you can afford with property taxes. In this article from the LA Times, they point out most of the immigrants in this school were from Central America, part of several waves of more than 100,000 who arrived as children in the U.S. in the past 5 years. That's understating that number significantly. They say in Los Angeles Belmont High, nearly a quarter of the school's estimated 1,000 students came from Central America. One of the teachers was talking about this, and she said, well, we first noticed a surge of students from Central America in the spring of 2013. That's Hillary and Obama's open borders. That's Hillary's dream, that she tells the bankers she has a dream of open borders. This is what it looks like. It has real practical consequences. These are people who come here and make themselves dependents of yours. You have to pay for their education. As she points out in this article, I say some of the Guatemalan students that arrived spoke only indigenous languages, such as, and not even sure how to pronounce this, quiche and mam. Okay, they're not even Spanish. So you have to go out, according to our system, according to federal mandates, they have to go out and find tutors who are going to tutor the children in the language that they choose. So not in Spanish even, or certainly not in English. The other side of this that is not a good deal for the dreamers who are destroying the American dream of having a household. The other side of this is that they come in with significant debts that they owe to coyotes. As they point out, this one child, Marcos, paid coyotes to guide him in. He said he spent 3 days lost and without water in the Sonoran Desert. He didn't eat for a week. He was kidnapped later by 2 men who wanted him to pay $3,000 to let him go. They spoke only English. He spoke only Spanish, but he had a translation app on a cell phone, he said, they used so that he could negotiate the price with them down to $1,000 at the time. He was 13 years old, but now every month he is paying out $300 to pay off a cumulative debt of $10,000 that was there to smuggle him into the U.S. And he says in Spanish, because he still doesn't speak English, "What can I do?" It's not a good deal for the people coming in. It is not a good deal for Americans who are here. It is only a good deal for Hillary and her banker friends. And when we look at this, another article from the AP says that for some low-income workers, retirement is only a dream. See, we have a lot of working poor in America, and they're not going to be able to afford these property taxes to educate the world for free. They point out with no money saved for retirement, home care worker Gwen Strobridge, 71, of Deerfield, Florida, plans to stay on the job until she can't physically work anymore. That's the life that Americans who have lived here all their life are now seeing ahead of them. And she's not going to be able to afford a home either. We're being lowered to the level of the third world. So they're not escalating the people who are coming in here to a higher standard of living. They're loading them up with debt that they have to pay to smugglers. They're loading them with other kinds of debt. And they are loading us with the debt that is going to come from having to pay for these schools everywhere. It's a race to the bottom for all of us. And that's where we see the true income inequality coming in. Now, on the gun front, we've seen reports that WikiLeaks has put out that Hillary Clinton had gun control supporters planted in a town hall audience. As they say to her, well, this town hall audience is not really about gun violence. It's just a regular town hall. But they say, we will have a person who will introduce Hillary Clinton and tell a story about gun violence in her life. And there will be people in the audience from gun violence organizations. So they're going to plant a narrative there. They're going to have people who are going to ask her questions. And then they have her come up with talking points so she can have a scripted response to all of this. And the text of her speech shows that she promises to make gun control a top priority. Of course, she's going to do this by executive order if the democratic process doesn't work out for her. You know, if our elected representatives in the republic that we have here are not willing to overthrow our Bill of Rights and Constitution, then she'll just have to go around them and do it herself with an executive order. And of course, the things that she wants on this list are things like an assault weapons ban, more background checks and so forth. And she tied it in at the time to a shooting that had happened in an Oregon community college. And as I point out in this Breitbart article, she didn't mention the fact that the Oregon Community College campus was already a gun-free zone, which means that it was 100% gun control, and that the gunman there had gone through a background check. That is the technique that is being used for gun control, to create lists of gun owners. And now we see a Democrat Senate hopeful who has been trailing his Republican rival in Missouri for quite some time. They say now it looks like he's going to turn this around with a 30-second commercial. And what does he do in this 30-second commercial? He blindfolds himself and he assembles an AR-15. This is a guy who was in the military. And of course, many people in the military learn how to put their guns together blindfolded so they can do it in the dark. That doesn't mean that he knows anything about the Constitution or that he respects the Constitution. While this guy is assembling a gun blindfolded, he is trying to disassemble our Bill of Rights, disassemble the Constitution. Maybe he should take off the blindfold and read the Bill of Rights. Understand that the founders never wanted a permanent standing army, a mercenary force. No, what they wanted was a citizen militia. You should also go back and look at what happened at Concord and Lexington. They were coming for the state-of-the-art assault weapons in those days, including cannons. The same thing happened with the Texas Revolution as it kicked off. You had Santa Anna coming to take the cannons. That's why it's not even a picture of a gun on the come and take it flag. It's a cannon. The militia should have the tools to defend itself from invaders, foreign and domestic. And yet we've got this guy, because he was in the military, saying, I want to make sure that terrorists can't get their hands on one of these because I'm going to load them down with laws. And we all know that terrorists are frightened about laws more than anything else. They would never consider breaking the law so that they could attack us. That is what we see. At the same time, we see the state of California offering reenlistment to the soldiers there, now telling them decades later they got to pay back $40,000 or $50,000 as an enlistment bonus. That's the respect they give to the Army. At the same time, they're trying to disarm the citizens. Stay with us. We'll be right back.